Betrayal doesn't just break hearts, it reveals truth. In losing everything she believed in, she found something far more powerful: awareness. The illusion of love collapsed, exposing manipulation, lies, and control beneath it all. But instead of falling apart, she chose to see clearly, and that changed everything. The lesson? Sometimes, the truth that hurts you is the same truth that frees you. Like and share to spread this message. Thanks for watching.
Rachel was 8 months pregnant and bleeding on the cold kitchen floor. Her life was supposed to be a fairy tale. Her husband, Marcus, was supposedly in London closing a deal worth $1 billion. He promised he would call her every night. But her brother had just checked Marcus's phone location. He was not in another country. He was only 20 minutes away inside another woman's apartment, while his wife and unborn child were fighting to stay alive. The secrets Rachel was about to uncover would shatter the perfect life she thought she had. These truths would make her question everything about her marriage and the man she loved. But Marcus made one huge mistake. He assumed Rachel was weak. He thought she would just pick up the broken pieces of her life and quietly go away. He was very wrong. The woman who survived that terrible night was not the same woman who collapsed. She came back stronger, smarter, and determined to destroy the man who betrayed her. This is the incredible story of how a pregnant wife turned from a victim into a victor. I promise, the twists you are about to hear will leave you in complete shock, but before we start, you need to know this is more than just a story. This is a roadmap for survival. As you hear what happened, you will learn to see the warning signs of a manipulator before they can destroy your life. You will see how the rich and powerful can bend the rules to silence the people they hurt. And most importantly, you will learn that no matter how bad things get, you always have the power to fight back. Every betrayal Rachel endures, every trap set for her, and every time justice fails her, there is a lesson that could one day save you or someone you care about. So I am asking you to listen very closely. The wisdom in this story is more valuable than any amount of money. The call to 911 was made at 11:47 on a Saturday night. A panicked, weak voice spoke to the dispatcher. "My sister is 8 months pregnant, and there is so much blood. Please, you have to help her." The operator's voice was calm and professional. "Ma'am, please stay on the line with me. What is your address?" 427 Whitmore Drive in Greenwich, Connecticut. "It is the Bennett estate. Please, just send an ambulance right now. She is not moving. Can you check if she is breathing?" There was a long, tense silence filled with a desperate search for a sign of life. "Yes, but it is very shallow. Oh my goodness, the blood is everywhere." "Help is on the way, ma'am. Please stay with her." The call ended, but the pure terror in that voice lingered with everyone who heard the tape. The woman on the marble floor of her beautiful home was about to learn a horrible truth. The life she thought she had was just a carefully built lie. And her husband, the man who promised to love and protect her, was not closing a business deal in London. He was just a 20-minute drive away in the arms of another woman. Only 12 hours earlier, Rachel Bennett's life looked absolutely perfect. At 32 years old, she had it all. She lived in a huge mansion that had been featured in a design magazine. Her husband was worth over $2 billion, and she was only 4 weeks from meeting her baby girl. The nursery was completely ready. The walls were painted a soft pink, and tiny baby clothes were neatly folded in the dresser drawers. Those drawers alone had cost more than the old car Rachel used to love. But Marcus had forced her to sell it. He claimed she needed a much safer car for their baby. So a new Tesla was now parked in the garage, and her 10-year-old Honda was gone before she could even say a proper goodbye. "It is only a car, Rachel," he had said when she became upset. "I am just trying to protect our family." That was Marcus. He was always the protector, the provider, and the person who knew what was best. Rachel was in her giant living room putting white roses in vases for her baby shower. Soon, 30 of her friends and family would arrive to celebrate baby Emma, but the guests were mostly the wives of Marcus's business friends. Rachel's own friends had slowly disappeared during her 3 years of marriage. Only Diane was still around, and even she said that Rachel was never free anymore. The first cramp started while she was arranging the gift table. She gasped quietly and placed a hand on her stomach. She smiled, thinking it was just a practice contraction. Her doctor said they were common for first-time mothers, But 5 minutes later, another one came, and it was much stronger. Rachel put down the vase and took a slow, deep breath. She told herself she was just tired. She had been working all morning to make sure every single detail of the party was perfect. Marcus wanted to hire a party planner, but she refused. Planning the shower was one of the few things in her life that still felt like her own. She took out her phone to send him a text message. She just wanted to feel close to him, even though an ocean was between them. "Hi, sweetheart, the house looks so pretty for the shower. I miss you so much. Please call me when you get a chance." She stared at her phone, waiting to see the 3 little dots that meant he was replying. But the dots never appeared. The official story was that Marcus was in London for a very important negotiation for his company, Bennett Technologies. He had been gone for 3 days and had promised he would call every single night. But for the last 48 hours, her calls went straight to his voicemail. "The negotiations are at a very sensitive point," his assistant Jennifer had told her. "He requested no interruptions at all unless it is a real emergency." The third contraction was so powerful it brought Rachel to her knees. This was not a false alarm. The pain felt like a fire spreading inside her, making it hard to breathe or think straight. She held onto the edge of the gift table to keep from falling. And that is when she noticed it. A dark red stain was spreading across the white marble floor. There was so much blood. Rachel tried to scream for help, but the catering staff was in the kitchen and did not hear her. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone, her vision becoming blurry. She tried to call Marcus one last time. Voicemail. She tried Jennifer. No answer. Using her very last bit of strength, she called the one person she knew would always answer no matter what. "Tyler," she managed to whisper when her brother answered. "Something is wrong. The baby. There is so much blood." Rachel, where are you?" "I am at home, Tyler. I think I am dying." The phone slipped from her fingers as another intense wave of pain washed over her. She could hear her brother's voice, sounding tiny and far away, yelling her name just before everything went dark. Tyler Morrison broke every speed limit on his way from Queens to Greenwich. He was a construction manager, not a rich executive. He drove a rusty, old pickup truck. The police in Greenwich should have pulled him over for driving 90 miles per hour in a 55-mile-per-hour zone. But maybe they saw the pure panic in his eyes and decided to let him pass. Tyler had never really trusted Marcus Bennett. From the very first time his sister introduced him to the tech billionaire, something felt wrong. The man was too smooth, too perfect, and just too good to be true. But Rachel was so deeply in love, completely sure that she had found her Prince Charming. She really believed she was getting her fairy tale ending. So Tyler kept his doubts to himself. That is what a good brother does. You support your sister even when you have a strong feeling she is making a terrible mistake. He used an emergency key Rachel had given him years ago to let himself in. It was from a time when she lived in a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, long before Marcus had moved her into his enormous glass mansion in Connecticut. The second he opened the heavy front door, Tyler's heart stopped. Rachel was lying on the floor surrounded by a widening pool of dark blood. Her face was as pale as a sheet, and her breathing was so weak he could hardly see her chest move. "Rach!" Tyler dropped to his knees next to her. He hovered his hands over her, too scared to touch her. He had no idea how to stop the bleeding. He just knew that his little sister was dying in front of his eyes. The paramedics arrived 7 minutes later, but it felt like a lifetime. They worked with a calm focus, getting Rachel onto a stretcher and shouting medical words that Tyler could not understand. The paramedics threw questions at him from all directions. One asked about Rachel's medical history, another wanted a list of her allergies. But it was the third question that hit him like a punch to the stomach. Where was her husband? The question bounced around in Tyler's head. Where in the world was Marcus? With ambulance sirens screaming around them on the way to Greenwich Hospital, Tyler tried Marcus's cell phone again. It went directly to voicemail. He called Jennifer, Marcus's assistant, but her voicemail picked up too. He even tried the main office for Bennett Technologies. A recorded message said the offices were closed for the day. His sister was fighting for her life in an ambulance, and her billionaire husband was nowhere to be found. Something was very, very wrong. Dr. Patricia Williams had been a surgeon for 23 years. She knew how to share terrible news with a mix of compassion and honesty. She saw Tyler in the waiting room. He was still in his work clothes, now stained with dirt and his sister's blood. "Mr. Morrison?" she asked, taking a seat beside him. "I am Dr. Williams. I am the surgeon taking care of your sister." Tyler jumped up from his chair. "Is she all right? Is the baby going to be okay?" Dr. Williams gently guided him back to his seat. Her expression was kind, but her eyes were filled with a heavy seriousness. His sister was in a fight for her life. The doctor told him the placenta had detached, causing a massive amount of internal bleeding. The floor seemed to sway beneath Tyler's feet. He managed to find his voice and ask, "So what happens to them now?" The doctor's voice was grave. "This means we have to do an emergency cesarean section right away. The baby is in danger, and Rachel is losing blood much too fast." Dr. Williams met Tyler's gaze, making sure he knew just how serious things were. "I have to be completely honest with you. This is a critical emergency for both your sister and the baby." Tyler's voice was shaking when he begged. "But you can save them, right? You can save both of them. We will do everything in our power, but I need your signature on these consent forms. Rachel listed you as her emergency contact." Tyler looked at her, completely baffled. "I am her emergency contact? Why would it not be her husband?" The doctor's kind face tensed slightly. "Our records show you are the main contact. We attempted to call Mr. Bennett, but we were unable to get in touch with him." With a trembling hand, Tyler signed the papers. In that exact moment, a gurney carrying Rachel was hurried through the double doors into the operating room. Tyler collapsed into a hard plastic chair and looked at his phone's blank screen. He dialed Marcus's number one more time. As he expected, it went to his voicemail. A deep, cold fear started to build inside him. Marcus Bennett was a lot of things, and most of them were not good. But one thing he never was unavailable. His whole empire was founded on being reachable 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The thought of him being out of contact during an emergency like this seemed wrong. It seemed impossible. Unless he was not where he said he was. Tyler launched the location app that Rachel had made them all download years ago. She did it back when their mom was sick, just to keep her from worrying so much. Rachel's little icon appeared right there in the hospital. Tyler's icon was in the exact same place. But Marcus's icon was in Stamford, Connecticut. He was not on a business trip in London. He was not flying over the ocean. He was in Stamford, just a 20-minute drive from where they were right now. Tyler just stared at his phone, trying to make sense of it. His exhausted brain could not believe it. This had to be some kind of error. Perhaps he was at a private airfield. Maybe his phone was just picking up the wrong signal. He told himself there had to be a logical reason for what he saw on the screen. But Tyler had been in the Army before he started his construction job. He had been trained to trust his gut. And at that moment, his gut was telling him that Marcus Bennett was precisely where the app showed him to be. He was somewhere he had no business being, doing something he should not be doing, while his own wife was battling for her life. Tyler saved a picture of the map on his phone. Then, he prepared himself for what was going to be an incredibly long night. The operation took 5 agonizing hours. Tyler walked back and forth in the waiting area until he felt like he was going to be sick. He forced down some terrible coffee from a machine that had a strange burning smell. He let his phone ring when worried family members called after hearing the baby shower had been canceled. At last, at 2:17 in the morning, Dr. Williams emerged from the operating room. Her uniform was stained, but a weary smile was on her face. "She's going to pull through," the doctor told him. "Things were very uncertain for a time, but your sister is a fighter." Tyler felt hot tears rolling down his cheeks before he even knew he was crying. "What about the baby?" he finally asked. "Your new niece is very small, but she is a very determined little girl. She weighs 4 pounds and 2 ounces. She will have to be in the neonatal intensive care unit for a little while. But all her signs are looking good. She definitely gets her strength from her mother." "Is it possible for me to see them?" Tyler asked. "Rachel is still coming out from the anesthesia. But you are welcome to see the baby." Tyler walked behind Dr. Williams through several long hallways until they reached the special care nursery. Through a big window, he saw lines of incubators. Inside each one was a tiny baby hooked up to a web of wires and machines. The doctor gestured toward one of them. "There is Emma," she said. Tyler pressed his palm against the cold glass. The baby was unbelievably tiny. Her skin was so delicate it seemed you could see right through it. He saw her small chest move up and down as she breathed. She already had a thick patch of dark hair, the same as Rachel's. "Your mother is going to be just fine, little girl," Tyler whispered. "And I give you my word, I will locate your father and bring him here, even if I have to do it by force." His next move was obvious. He had to discover where Marcus Bennett was truly hiding. Diane Torres rushed into the hospital at 3 in the morning. She had a long coat thrown on over her pajamas. "Tyler, what on earth is going on?" she asked, her eyes wide with fear as she hurried toward him. "I got Rachel's message that the shower was off, but then she would not answer her phone. I have been trying to call for hours." "She collapsed," Tyler explained. "The doctor called it a placental abruption. They needed to do an emergency delivery." "Oh, heavens," Diane breathed, sinking into the chair beside him. "Is she okay? And the baby?" "They are both going to pull through. But Diane, there is something I need you to see." Tyler took out his phone and brought up the picture of Marcus's location. Diane looked at it for a long time without saying a word. "Well, that is certainly not London," she said softly. "No, it is not," Tyler agreed. "What is that place?" "Stamford. It seems to be an apartment complex just off of Exit 5. The look of concern on Diane's face changed to absolute rage. "That two-timing monster." "I do not want to assume the worst," Tyler said, even though he already had. "There might be a good explanation." "Tyler," Diane interrupted, "there is only a single reason a husband would be secretly in a Stamford apartment instead of on a business trip to London, particularly when his wife is close to death. You and I both know what that reason is." Tyler knew it was true. He had felt it the second he saw the map, but he needed evidence. Rachel deserved to have solid, undeniable evidence. "I have a person," Diane said after thinking for a second. "He is a private detective. He is very expensive, but he is the best there is. He was the one who uncovered all of my ex-husband's hidden bank accounts." "What are his fees?" Tyler asked. "Likely more than a guy in construction from Queens can afford." But then Diane gave a small smile and pulled out her own phone. "It is a good thing I am a paralegal who has a special dislike for unfaithful husbands. I can get us a discount." Marcus Bennett entered Greenwich Hospital at 9:15 the next morning. He put on a flawless performance as the concerned billionaire husband. He carried a massive bouquet of expensive white roses and had an expression of deep worry carefully fixed on his face. His suit was tailored perfectly, his hair was styled perfectly, and his shoes likely cost more than Tyler's entire monthly rent. "Rachel, my darling," Marcus announced, striding into her room as if he owned the entire hospital. Tyler recalled that the Bennett family name was on the new children's wing, so in a way, he probably did. "I came back as quickly as I could." Rachel was now awake. She was pale and appeared incredibly fragile, but her mind was clear. She had been asking for Marcus ever since she woke up, certain that he was sick with worry over her. Tyler watched his sister's face brighten the moment she saw her husband, and his own heart felt like it was shattering into pieces. "Marcus," Rachel whispered, "you came." "Of course I came," Marcus replied, kissing her forehead. He gently held her face in his hand. "I was on the very first flight out of London. Jennifer called me the second I landed. I was stuck in meetings and the satellite phone had no service. I had no idea at all," he said. The lie slid from his lips so smoothly that it sounded like the absolute truth. If Tyler had not seen the tracking data with his own two eyes, he might have believed him as well. What would you do if you discovered your sister's husband was a pathological liar? For Tyler, there was only one path forward. "Have you gone to see Emma yet?" Rachel asked her husband. "Not yet. I had to see you first." "How are you feeling?" Tyler quietly exited the hospital room. He could not bear to watch his brother-in-law Marcus pretend to be a devoted husband for one more second. Out in the hallway, his phone vibrated. It was a text from his friend Diane. "My contact can see us tomorrow. He is confident he can find out where Marcus was and who he was with." "But Tyler, are you really sure you want to do this?" Once Rachel finds out, everything will change forever. Tyler peered through the window at his sister. She was offering a faint smile to the man who had abandoned her when she needed him most. With steady hands, he typed out his response. Do it. She deserves to know the whole story. Carl Mendez did not fit the image of a typical private investigator. He was dressed in faded jeans and a New York Yankees sweatshirt, and he was drinking a cheap coffee from a cafe nearby. He looked like any other person you might pass on the street. He sat in a Manhattan diner, attempting to look casual, but his eyes revealed a different truth. They were sharp, constantly scanning and absorbing every single detail around him. This was obviously a man who earned his living by observing people. All right, Carl said, sliding into the booth opposite Tyler and Diane. So let me make sure I have this right. You believe your sister's husband is cheating on her while she is in the hospital with their premature child. Tyler simply gave a slight nod, his eyes locked on the table. I know how that probably sounds. Carl just shrugged his shoulders. It sounds like almost every case I have taken on for the last 30 years, he said. A rich man cheating on his wife is not a new story. The only thing that matters is how careless he has been. The night she collapsed, he was at an apartment in Stamford, Diane clarified. We could see his location on his phone. Carl's eyebrows raised in surprise. You actually have his location data? A screenshot from an application? Tyler nodded once more. That is an amazing head start. Carl took out a small, well-used notebook. I need you to tell me everything. His name, his company, his daily habits, and the name of anyone you think might be involved. For the next hour, Tyler and Diane shared everything they knew about Marcus Bennett and his company, Bennett Technologies. It all began when Marcus claimed his work schedule was becoming unpredictable, with sudden business trips that appeared out of thin air. Then, about 18 months ago, he hired a young woman named Victoria Chase as his head of strategic development. Diane mentioned she was 27 years old and looked like a supermodel. She also said Marcus spoke about her as if she had personally created the internet. Carl wrote her name down in his notebook. He glanced up and asked, "And what is your sister's opinion of this Victoria?" Tyler took a moment, trying to remember the few times Rachel had brought her up. She said Marcus thinks Victoria is a genius, Tyler replied. He says she has a special kind of insight that most people just do not have. Carl let out a short, cynical laugh. I am sure she has a special insight, an insight that is probably 6 feet tall with very long legs. He shut his notebook with a firm snap. Give me 1 week. I will discover exactly what your dear Marcus has been doing. Just 3 days later, Carl called with his first significant breakthrough. Your brother-in-law has not been to London in over 6 months, Carl said without any preamble. His private jet, with the tail number November 787 Romeo Mike, was supposed to fly to Heathrow last week, but the flight plan was altered, not just once, but twice. So where did the plane actually go? Tyler asked with urgency. First it flew to Los Angeles, and from there it continued on to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. He arrived in Mexico on the very same night your sister was rushed to the hospital, Carl went on. Tyler could feel his own rage simmering just beneath the surface. Mexico, he repeated in a quiet, tense voice. Carl continued, and the plot thickens. According to the immigration documents, there were 2 individuals on that flight, Marcus Bennett and Victoria Chase. They checked into a resort called Casa del Mar. They were given the presidential suite for a 4-night stay. Tyler squeezed his eyes shut. A part of him had anticipated this, but hearing the concrete proof felt like a physical blow. There is more, Carl said. I have a source in Cabo, a photographer who provides pictures to celebrity gossip magazines. He got photos. What kind of photos? Tyler asked, though he was certain he would despise the answer. The kind of photos that will make your sister's divorce lawyer a very wealthy man. Tyler looked down at the images laid out on Carl's desk. In one picture, Marcus and Victoria were holding hands while walking on a private beach. In another, Victoria was feeding Marcus strawberries during an intimate dinner. A third photo captured Marcus kissing Victoria on the neck as she laughed, tilting her head back in pure bliss. But the most damning photograph of all was taken at the resort's spa. Marcus's wedding band was sitting on a small table next to a massage bed in perfect, clear focus. And on Victoria's left hand, a gigantic diamond ring glittered under the brilliant Mexican sun. It was undeniably an engagement ring, and it must have cost an absolute fortune. Tyler used his phone to zoom in on the picture. "That ring is enormous," he remarked. "It must be at least 5 carats." Carl nodded in agreement. "It is a custom-designed piece. I had a jeweler friend of mine evaluate it. He estimates its value at over $200,000. Rachel's engagement ring was lovely, but it was nowhere close to that size. Marcus had always spoken about buying her a larger ring someday, when the company was in a better financial position. It appeared he had finally made that upgrade, just not for his wife. "When did he propose to Rachel?" Carl inquired. "About 2.5 years ago," Tyler answered. "Well," Carl stated, "he proposed to Victoria 3 weeks ago. It happened at a private dinner in Malibu. I even have the restaurant bill. He purchased a $9,000 bottle of champagne to celebrate." Tyler felt a wave of nausea. This was not just a casual affair. This was an entirely separate life. Marcus was constructing a future with another woman, while his pregnant wife was at home, trusting every single one of his lies. "She needs to know the truth," Tyler said, his voice full of conviction. Carl nodded his head slowly. "I agree. But the challenge is how you deliver news like this. The timing is critical. Your sister just recovered from a major operation. My brother told our private investigator, her baby is still in the neonatal intensive care unit. If you show her this now, the shock could destroy her." "But if I wait," Tyler argued, "it just gives Marcus more time to cover his tracks." The investigator, Carl, admitted, "That is also true." He leaned back in his chair and said, "So you have a choice to make. What is more important right now, your sister's well-being or your need to expose him?" It was a terrible choice, and Tyler had no idea what to do. But in the end, I made the decision for him. When Tyler came to the hospital that afternoon, he found me sitting up in bed. Something had changed. I felt some color in my face again, and my eyes were bright and clear in a way he had not seen for a long time. I said to him, "I need to talk to you. Can you close the door?" Tyler did what I asked, and I could feel my own heart starting to beat faster. I began, "I have been doing a lot of thinking. I have been replaying the night I collapsed. I remembered that it was impossible to get a hold of Marcus, and I thought it was strange how he was suddenly on the first flight out of London as soon as he heard." Tyler said gently, "Rach, maybe you should just rest." With a strong and clear voice, I declared, "I am finished with resting. I have been in this bed for 3 days with nothing to do but think." And the details of his story just do not add up. He asked, "What are you trying to say?" I told him, "Marcus told me he was in the middle of a major business deal. He claimed the satellite phones were down and that he came directly here from the airport." I shook my head from side to side. "But Tyler, I know my husband. He is always completely exhausted after a long flight from another country. His suit is always a mess of wrinkles. He has that stale airplane air smell on him. But when he walked in here, he looked perfect. He wore a crisp, clean suit, and every single hair was exactly in place. He looked like he had just stepped out of the shower." My eyes met Tyler's. "He never went to London, did he?" Tyler was silent for a second. Then, without saying a word, he pulled out his phone. He first showed me a picture of the location data, and then he started showing me the photos. As I looked at each picture, a storm of different feelings passed over my face. It started with confusion, which was quickly followed by disbelief. Then came a quiet, empty shock that was much harder to see than tears would have been. "That is impossible," I whispered, my eyes fixed on the picture of Marcus and Victoria kissing on a beach. "He told me he was in London. This has to be some kind of mistake." Tyler said softly, "Rach, flight records do not lie." I kept swiping through the pictures on his phone. When I got to the photo of Victoria's enormous engagement ring, my hand automatically went to cover my own wedding ring, a beautiful but much smaller 3-carat diamond. 3 years ago, the ring on my finger had seemed like the most gorgeous thing in the whole world. But now, looking at it after seeing Victoria's, it felt painfully simple. "He asked her to marry him," I said, my voice completely empty. While I was here at home, pregnant with his baby, he was proposing to another woman. Tyler added in a quiet voice, "It happened 3 weeks ago. They took a trip to Malibu." I did not say anything for a very long time. I carefully closed the phone and gave it back to my brother. "I need to go see Emma," I said. "Rachel, we have to discuss this. We should be calling a lawyer right now." "I have to see my daughter," I repeated, with more determination. Tyler helped me get into a wheelchair. He recognized that tone in my voice. It was the same quiet strength I had when our father left us when we were kids. It was the tone I used when I worked as a waitress to pay for my own college education. It was the tone I had when I built my career from the ground up, years before Marcus talked me into giving it all up. The Rachel Morrison I was before I became Rachel Bennett was a fighter. And Tyler could see that woman was finally starting to wake up. In the neonatal intensive care unit, I put my hands on the glass of Emma's incubator and started to cry. But these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, burning anger. "He knew," I whispered. I called him 2 days before I collapsed. I did not have to tell him I was feeling sick. He already knew. Tyler, he knew exactly what he was doing when he went to Mexico with her. He kissed me goodbye that morning. He even said he loved me. But the whole time he was secretly making plans to propose to someone else. Tyler just stood there and watched me change right in front of him. The trusting young woman who had put all of her faith in her husband was disappearing. A stronger person was coming out in her place, someone filled with a new and clear sense of purpose. "How long do you think this has been going on?" I asked. "Carl is still looking into it," Tyler replied. "But based on the flight records, they flew together at least 6 times in the last year. It was always on trips Marcus said were for business." I was quiet for a while, my hands still resting on the warm plastic of the incubator. When I finally looked back at him, my voice was much more stable. "I want to see everything. Every flight, every lie, every single dollar he spent on her. I want copies of the receipts, the pictures, and the bank statements. I want it all." Tyler said, "Rachel, maybe you should concentrate on your recovery first. This can all wait." "No, it cannot," I snapped back. I looked right at him, and Tyler saw a fire in my eyes that he had never seen there before. Because it is only a matter of time before he walks back through that door. And when he comes back, he will have a perfectly good explanation for everything. He will try to convince me that I am crazy for ever doubting him. He will twist everything around until I start to think this is all my fault. Tyler had to admit that I was right. Marcus had a remarkable talent for manipulating people. He was an expert at making you question your own senses. "But if I have proof," I continued, "if I have solid evidence that he cannot talk his way out of, then I will be the one in charge. For the first time in 3 years, I will be the one holding the power." "What are you going to do?" Tyler asked me. I looked back at my daughter, Emma, who was sleeping so soundly, totally unaware of the machines that were keeping her alive. "I am going to protect my little girl," I said, "and I am going to make sure that Marcus Bennett pays for every single lie he has ever told me." 2 weeks passed, and I was finally able to leave the hospital. Emma had to stay in the intensive care unit for a few more weeks, but I was well enough to be sent home. I did not go back to our large house in Greenwich. Instead, I booked a room at a hotel near the hospital. I told everyone that I just wanted to be close to Emma. But the real reason was much simpler and much more painful. I could not stand the thought of going into that house again. The simple thought of going back to that house made me feel ill. It was the place where my whole world had crumbled, where every room was now a painful memory of a life I now knew was a total lie. My friend Diane helped me get settled in, bringing with her some comfort food, a bottle of wine, and the kind of direct friendship I really needed. "Okay, so what is our plan?" Diane asked as she poured 2 large glasses of Pinot Noir. "First thing," I said with determination, "I need a lawyer, a very good one. I need someone who handles divorces with a lot of money involved and is not afraid to go up against a billionaire." A huge smile spread across Diane's face. "Girl, I have been waiting 3 years for you to finally say that. I know exactly who you should call." Helena Cross was even tougher than I had imagined. At 48 years old, she had built a reputation as the most aggressive divorce lawyer in Manhattan. She was known for never giving in to powerful men and their expensive lawyers. The walls of her office were lined with framed newspaper articles that showed off her biggest victories, each one telling the story of a rich husband who did not take her seriously enough. "Your situation is a complete mess," Helena told me directly as we sat in her midtown office. "But it is a mess that also gives us some advantages." "What are you trying to say?" Rachel asked. "The positive side is that his infidelity provides us with a very strong legal advantage," Helena explained, "particularly because he abandoned you during a severe medical crisis. The negative side is that you signed a prenuptial agreement that is almost impossible to break under normal circumstances." A chilling sensation spread through Rachel. The prenup was something Marcus had demanded before they got married. She had signed it without any hesitation, too lost in love to ever think it would become a problem. What would make this an abnormal circumstance? "If we can prove that you were tricked into the marriage," Helena said, "or if we can show that Marcus was already being dishonest with you when you signed that agreement, we might have a chance to get the entire contract thrown out. The private investigator has proof that Marcus started taking trips with Victoria 18 months ago. That was before Emma was even a thought." A glimmer of interest flashed in Helena's eyes. "That's a great place to start, but we will need more than that. We need financial documents that prove he was lying. We need to locate hidden bank accounts. We need proof that Marcus was already planning to leave you while he was misrepresenting the family's real financial situation." "How on earth are we supposed to find that kind of proof?" Rachel asked. Helena's smile was chilling, like a hunter revealing its teeth. "We will let him think he has already won. Then we will simply wait for him to get sloppy." The plan Helena proposed was a huge gamble, but it was also brilliant. Rachel was to act like the devastated wife, grateful for whatever crumbs Marcus decided to offer. She would pretend her only worry was for Emma's future, not for their money. In the background, Helena's team would start a quiet investigation into the finances of Bennett Technologies. The investigator, Carl, would keep digging into Victoria's past, and Rachel would collect any proof she could find inside their home. "This entire plan depends on them underestimating you," Helena cautioned. "Rich men like Marcus believe women in your situation will just take what they are given. They assume you will be too scared to fight and lose everything. We are going to turn his own arrogance into our greatest weapon." "But what if he is right? What if I do fight back and end up with nothing?" Helena leaned in close. "Then you will lose with your head held high, and your daughter will always remember that her mother was brave enough to stand up for her." Rachel pictured Emma, so tiny and frail in her hospital incubator. She thought of all the things she wanted for her little girl: to always feel safe, to be raised in a stable home, and to have a mother who would never let anyone take advantage of her. "So when do we start?" Helena smiled again. "We already have." That evening, Rachel stepped back into her enormous Greenwich house for the first time since her collapse. Marcus was there waiting for her in the living room. A bottle of champagne sat chilling in a silver ice bucket. His smile was so warm and inviting, the perfect image of a husband happy to have his wife home. "I thought a celebration was in order," he said, pouring them both a glass. "Emma is getting stronger and you are finally out of the hospital." "That is very thoughtful of you," Rachel said. She took the glass he offered but didn't drink from it. She had learned a long time ago that Marcus only made big gestures like this when he was feeling guilty. "I have been doing a lot of thinking about our future," Marcus went on, "and about the life we want to create for Emma." Rachel arranged her face into a look of hopeful curiosity. "Oh?" "I realize all my business trips have been hard on us. So I have been thinking about making a change at the company. I want to make Victoria the new chief operating officer. Victoria is already running most of the day-to-day operations, and she is doing a fantastic job. This promotion would allow me to spend more quality time here with you and Emma." A cold, sick feeling washed over me. Marcus was promoting his mistress and framing it as some kind of noble sacrifice for his family. I chose my next words with extreme care. I said, "That seems like a very big responsibility for someone her age." Marcus gave a little dismissive smile and said, "Age is not important when you have a clear vision. Victoria sees the future of technology in a way most people just do not understand. I replied, I am sure she does. The sharp sarcasm in my voice went completely unnoticed. In fact, he continued, I was hoping you two could meet soon. She has been asking about you. She was very worried while you were recovering. The man's audacity was simply stunning. But I just smiled and nodded, staying in character as the supportive wife. Perhaps when I'm feeling a little stronger, I said. He agreed, saying, of course there is no hurry at all. Right then, his phone vibrated. He glanced down and I saw that familiar look on his face. It was the secret, joyful smile that he only ever had for her. I need to take this. It is an emergency at the office. He stepped out onto the patio. I could hear parts of his conversation through the sliding glass door. It was not a call about work. His voice was low and gentle, full of soft laughs and sweet, whispered words. When he came back inside, his expression was completely blank again. He said, I'm sorry about that. The crisis has been handled. I went up to our bedroom early that night, telling him I was exhausted. But I stayed awake for hours, listening to the muffled sound of Marcus on the phone with Victoria. The battle had officially begun, and for the first time, I felt ready to fight. 3 weeks after coming home, I got the phone call I had been praying for. My lawyer, Helena, called me at 7 in the morning. Her voice, which was always so calm, was shaking with excitement. We have him, Helena announced. For the last 2 years, Bennett Technologies has been hiding money in offshore accounts. We discovered shell companies, secret bank accounts, and illegal tax shelters. My heart started to pound in my chest. I asked her, how much money are we talking about? She replied, our current estimate is at least $50 million. All of that money should have been part of your shared marital property. This new evidence allows us to throw out your prenuptial agreement. We can demand half of everything he owns, including every last one of those secret accounts. I whispered as a deep sense of relief flooded through me. So I can protect Emma's future. This is about so much more than that, Helena said firmly. This is your opportunity to finally make Marcus pay for everything he has done to you. I felt so light I thought I might just float away. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I could see a way out. I could imagine a future where I could provide for my daughter, completely free from the man who betrayed me. I asked her, so what do we do next? Helena explained the strategy. I am filing the motion this afternoon. It is an emergency request to freeze every bank account connected to Bennett Technologies while we investigate. By tomorrow morning, Marcus will not be able to touch a single penny without a judge's permission. That night, I let myself have a small celebration. My friend Diane came over with a bottle of champagne. My brother Tyler brought some pizzas. Emma was getting better so quickly that she was scheduled to leave the intensive care unit in just a few days. Everything was finally starting to turn around. Diane raised her glass and said, "Here is to karma finally punching the clock." Tyler added, "And here is to my sister who is about to take that snake for all he is worth." I smiled, a real smile, for what felt like the first time in forever. I said quietly, "This is for Emma, and for our new life." We ate and we drank and we laughed. For a few perfect hours, I let myself forget about the betrayal and the pain. I looked at the video monitor connected to the hospital. My daughter was sound asleep, getting bigger and healthier with each passing day. Everything was going to be okay. The next morning, I was woken up by a phone call that shattered my world all over again. A voice said, "Mrs. Bennett?" It was Jennifer, Marcus's assistant. Her voice was strangely formal and icy. "Mr. Bennett needs you to come to the house right away. There are some papers that you need to sign." I asked her, "What kind of papers?" She answered, "I cannot say, but he said it is extremely important." A chill ran down my spine, even though my hotel room was warm. Something was very wrong. Marcus never called me to sign documents. He had a whole staff of lawyers and accountants for things like that. "I will be there in an hour," I said. On the drive to our Greenwich house, I tried to call Helena, but it went straight to her voicemail. I tried to call Diane. Her phone also went to voicemail. I tried Tyler. Voicemail again. By the time I turned into the long, curving driveway of our mansion. My hands were shaking. Marcus was waiting for me in the formal living room. He was not alone. A woman I had never seen before sat next to him on the fancy white sofa. She was older, dressed perfectly, and had the look of someone who was an expert in expensive litigation and costly threats. A man in a police uniform stood behind them. Marcus spoke, his voice dripping with false concern. "Rachel, please sit down. We need to have a talk." I demanded, "What is happening here? Who are these people?" "This is Margaret Ellis," Marcus explained. "She is a court-appointed supervisor." "A supervisor for what?" Marcus heaved a great sigh, putting on a show of deep sorrow. "Rachel, I truly hoped it would not come to this. But it has been brought to my attention that your recent behavior poses a significant risk to Emma's well-being." It felt as if the floor had just dropped out from under me. I said, "My behavior?" Marcus shook his head with feigned sympathy. "Your paranoid accusations, hiring private investigators. This delusional belief that I was unfaithful when I was simply working abroad. Dr. Patterson has expressed his concern that you may be suffering from postpartum psychosis." I shouted, "I do not have postpartum psychosis." The woman named Margaret spoke in a calm, detached voice. "Denial is a very common symptom. It often accompanies paranoid delusions, obsessive behaviors, and an inability to distinguish reality from fantasy." My blood ran cold. This could not be real. That cannot be right. What are you talking about? The officer took a cautious step forward, his expression showing his dislike for the situation. "Mrs. Bennett, we have a temporary court order. It says you cannot see your daughter until you have a full psychiatric evaluation. You cannot take away my rights. She is my daughter. Your daughter will be quite safe with your husband while you get the help you need," a woman named Margaret stated coldly. Marcus approached with his arms wide, as if to embrace her. "Honey, I know this is a shock, but we all just want what is best for Emma. For that to happen, you need to be healthy." Rachel pulled away from him. "Stay away from me," she warned. "Did you see that?" Margaret wrote on her clipboard. "She is exhibiting paranoia and is resistant to touch. These are classic symptoms." "I am not paranoid," Rachel protested, her voice rising. "I have evidence that he is having an affair." "What evidence is that?" Marcus asked in a calm, soothing voice. "Evidence that I visited a coworker's apartment for a business meeting? Evidence that I had a meal with my staff on a work trip? Rachel, an unwell mind can make innocent things seem evil." "The pictures," Rachel stammered, desperation in her voice. "The airline tickets? The diamond ring he bought for her." Marcus held his hands up in a gesture of pure confusion. "What pictures are you talking about? What tickets?" "Honey, I spent that whole business trip in London. Anyone on the company board can confirm my location." He then motioned to his wedding ring. "And why would I buy a ring?" Marcus said, showing the gold band on his left hand, "when I am already married to the best woman in the world?" Rachel just stared, her mind spinning. The evidence. Helena had everything. Carl had the photos. "I need to speak with my attorney," Rachel said, her voice weak. "I apologize, but that is not possible right now," Margaret announced, moving closer. "For this evaluation to be effective, we must limit your contact with outside influences who might encourage your fantasies." "This is insane," Rachel breathed. "This cannot be happening." The policeman seemed uncomfortable. "Ma'am, this is a legal court order. The law requires me to escort you to the Pinehurst Wellness Center for a 72-hour hold. We can do this the easy way, or we can do it the hard way." Rachel looked at each face in the room. She saw Marcus and his phony look of care. She saw Margaret, all business and no heart. And she saw the officer who was apologetic but determined. She realized then that the trap was perfectly laid. "I just want to grab my purse," Rachel said quietly, "and I want to tell my daughter goodbye." The nurse spoke with a chilling lack of emotion. "I am sorry, but that is not an option. Contact with your daughter could interfere with your treatment." In that awful instant, Rachel understood the trap had closed around her. Her husband, Marcus, wanted more than just an advantage in their divorce proceedings. He wanted to erase her from their lives entirely. His strategy was simple: paint her as a mentally ill mother, secure sole custody of their daughter Emma, and cut Rachel out of the picture for good. and she had walked right into it. Pinehurst Wellness Center was a beautiful place built to conceal horrible secrets. The rich sent their troublesome family members here to vanish. It had stunning gardens and luxurious private rooms that resembled a five-star hotel. The staff was always discreet, speaking in hushed, soothing voices. It was a prison that looked like a paradise. For the first 24 hours, Rachel felt completely numb. Her phone was confiscated. Her designer outfits were swapped for a simple gray sweatsuit. Even her jewelry was taken, including the wedding ring from Marcus. On the second day, a psychiatrist named Dr. Morris entered her room. With a kind smile, he asked, "Mrs. Bennett, can you explain to me why you think you are here?" "I am here because my husband is trying to take my daughter from me," Rachel stated with conviction. "And the attorney I hired to stop him was working with him." Dr. Morris jotted a few notes on his pad. "Your husband did mention that you have been dealing with feelings of paranoia. He said you accused him of being unfaithful during a recent business trip." "I have proof," Rachel said immediately. "I have photographs." The doctor's tone stayed gentle, but his face showed clear doubt. "Oh, really? Do you happen to have those photographs with you? Could I see them?" A knot of fear tightened in Rachel's stomach. "No. They took my phone when I got here." "I understand," he replied, his voice even. "And what precisely was in these photographs?" "They showed my husband in Mexico with his mistress. He has been seeing her for over a year." Dr. Morris nodded thoughtfully, as if putting pieces together. "Mrs. Bennett, I spoke at length with your husband. He presented airline records confirming he was in London on those exact dates. He also gave me sworn statements from coworkers who attended meetings with him there. Furthermore, he has documentation proving the woman you mentioned was in Singapore at that time." "That is impossible," she whispered. "Alternatively," the doctor proposed gently, "is it possible that the stress from your pregnancy, combined with a difficult birth, has distorted your view of things?" Rachel could only stare at him, speechless. He was not trying to be mean. He genuinely thought he was telling her the truth. That meant Marcus had constructed an entire fake world with perfectly forged documents. He had the papers, the witnesses, and everything he needed to make her story sound like the delusions of a crazy person. This was not just about a cheating husband anymore. She was entangled in a system designed to protect powerful men like him, and she was completely alone. On her third day at the center, Rachel had a guest. She was sitting in the day room gazing blankly at a television when a nurse touched her arm. "Mrs. Bennett, your mother-in-law is here to visit." The words made no sense. Rachel did not have a mother-in-law. Marcus's mother had died when he was just 12 years old. Her legs felt like lead as she moved toward the visitation room, her thoughts scrambling to anticipate the next awful twist. A woman she had never seen before was sitting at the table. She looked to be in her 60s, with stylish silver hair and an air of quiet authority that spoke of money and power. "Rachel," the woman said, gesturing to the chair opposite her. "Please sit down." "We have to talk now. There is not much time," the woman stated the moment Rachel sat down. "Who are you?" Rachel asked, her voice barely a whisper. "My name is Evelyn Grant. I was once the mother-in-law of Victoria Chase." Rachel became completely still in her chair. "Victoria was married to my son Robert for 3 years. Evelyn's voice was gentle but had a hard edge, filled with a well-managed fury. "She stole $4 million from him and came close to destroying our family's good name." "I do not understand any of this," Rachel said, unable to make sense of the words. "Why have you come here? Why are you sharing this with me?" "Because I have been following your story in the newspapers," Evelyn clarified, "and I see every single step she is taking. The wife is unexpectedly placed in a private psychiatric hospital. She is prevented from having any contact with the outside world. The husband gives emotional interviews about how much he loves her and only wants her to get well." Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Rachel. "This is the very same strategy she used on my son. Victoria has done all of this before." A feeling of sickness washed over Rachel. "Victoria Chase is not her real name," Evelyn continued. "She was born Amber Jenkins. She is a career con artist. I am aware of at least 3 other wealthy men she has gone after. She works her way into their lives, persuades them to leave their wives, and then disappears with every dollar she can take. The room began to feel unsteady. But Marcus is not a victim, Rachel was able to say. He was having an affair with her behind my back. Oh, I have no doubt he was, Evelyn answered. But that simply makes him a part of her bigger plan. And I can promise you she is playing him as well. Amber does not only pursue the husband, Evelyn clarified. She does a full investigation of the entire family. She seeks out men who are already deeply unhappy, men who are looking for a reason to burn their own lives down. She presents herself as that reason, and she charges them a massive amount for the service. Then why are you here? Why offer me help? Rachel questioned. Because my son Robert did not recognize the trap until it was far too late. By that time, he had already wrecked his marriage, turned his children against him, and given Amber access to accounts that she emptied completely. Evelyn's expression was like solid rock. I will not remain silent while she tears another family apart the way she did to mine. She pushed a small business card across the table. This man is a lawyer, a legitimate one. He cannot be bribed. You need to contact him the moment you get out of this place. Evelyn then rose from her seat. And Rachel, she said, her voice firm, do not let them persuade you that you are losing your grip on reality. The most powerful aspect of a lie is when you hear it repeated so many times, you begin to accept it as the truth. Rachel was discharged from Pinehurst after the mandatory 72-hour hold. The doctor's final evaluation said she was experiencing extreme stress, but did not find any proof that she was a danger to herself or an unfit parent. Could you possibly imagine being informed that you are not allowed to see your own newborn baby? That was the horrifying situation Rachel confronted when she got to Greenwich Hospital. A security guard stood in her path, physically preventing her from entering the neonatal intensive care unit. I am very sorry, Mrs. Bennett, the guard said, his face showing his discomfort. Your visitation privileges have been suspended until a court hearing can be held. Suspended? My daughter is in there, Rachel shouted. I understand, ma'am, but we have a directive from the court. You are permitted one supervised visit for 1 hour only one time per week. Through the heavy glass of the doors, Rachel could see inside the nursery. And there, next to Emma's incubator, stood Marcus. He was holding their little girl, smiling at her, acting like the perfect, devoted father for everyone to witness. Rachel beat her hands against the glass, yelling his name, but it had no effect. Security guards escorted her out of the hospital. Her friend Diane was there waiting outside, with tears falling down her face. Rachel, I am so sorry. I tried to phone you. I tried to come see you in that facility, but they refused to let anyone in. What about Helena? What about the proof we gathered? It has all disappeared, Diane replied, her voice unsteady. Helena's firm is no longer able to represent you. They mentioned a conflict of interest. And Carl, the investigator, reported that his office was burglarized. Every single photograph, every single paper is gone. This is impossible. We can never win against someone with the kind of money and power Marcus has, Diane said. He had 3 whole days while you were confined. That was more than enough time for him to bribe anyone who was helping us and to get rid of all our evidence. Rachel's legs felt unstable, and she sank down onto a bench just beyond the hospital doors. She was without legal counsel, without proof for a case, and without any money at all. Worst of all, she had no access to her own daughter. It genuinely seemed like Marcus had already won. What am I going to do now? Rachel whispered, not speaking to anyone. Diane came and sat beside her, squeezing her hand gently. You are going to put up a fight, Diane stated with certainty. I do not know how we will do it, but you are the most resilient woman I have ever known. You are not going to let that evil man take your baby from you. But the immediate challenge was that Rachel had nowhere to stay. All of her financial accounts had been frozen. She was locked out of the home she owned. Every credit card in her name was denied. Even though she was the wife of a billionaire, she did not have enough cash for a cheap room for one night. You will come home with me, Diane said firmly. My sofa is not fancy, but it is available to you for as long as you need it. That night, as she lay on Diane's old, lumpy couch in her small Queens apartment, Rachel could do nothing but stare at the ceiling. She tried to figure out how her life had disintegrated so totally in such a brief period. The circumstances were an absolute nightmare. She had only $47, a daughter she was not permitted to visit, and a husband who had successfully portrayed her as mentally unstable to the entire world. She had nothing more to lose. And as she was about to learn, that fact made her much more dangerous than Marcus could ever comprehend. For the next 2 weeks, Rachel lived in a daze of sorrow. She was forced to pump breast milk that she knew her infant would never receive. She applied for numerous jobs that would not even grant her an interview. Her name was now well known for all the negative reasons, connected to stories of bitter divorces among the very wealthy. She spoke with dozens of lawyers, but as soon as they found out she would be facing Marcus Bennett, every single one of them declined to assist her. It felt as if the entire legal system was designed to defeat someone like her, and it was succeeding. Then, on a gray Tuesday morning, her reality changed. Diane had already left for her job. Rachel was alone in the tiny apartment, looking through job advertisements that seemed like a complete waste of effort. Then she heard a knock at the door. She was not anticipating any visitors. To be truthful, she had quit anticipating anything good at all. When Rachel looked through the peephole, her breath caught in her throat. It was Victoria Chase. Rachel's hand was unsteady as she went to open the door. A part of her desperately wanted to leave that door locked. This was the woman who had contributed to the ruin of her marriage. This was the woman who was probably living in Rachel's own house, sleeping in her bed, and acting as a mother to her child. But her curiosity was more powerful than her apprehension. Rachel opened the door slowly, standing right there. Victoria appeared very different from how she looked in the investigator's pictures. She was thinner, and her skin was very pale. She had deep, dark shadows under her eyes that expensive cosmetics could not cover. She looked like a person who had not had a peaceful night of sleep in a very long time. "I need to speak with you," Victoria said. "Can I please step inside?" "Why on this earth would I ever permit you into this apartment?" Rachel answered sharply. "Because I am the only person who can help you recover Emma." Rachel just looked at her for several seconds. Then she stepped aside to allow her to come in. Victoria sat down on Diane's sofa, holding a glass of water that she did not touch. "First, I want you to know my name is not Victoria, it is Amber Jenkins," she started. "You could say I am a professional homewrecker. I have been engaged in this specific line of work for the last 8 years. Rachel's jaw became tense. "So you make a living by destroying families for their money?" "I find men who are already on the brink of ruining their own families, and I simply help the process along, and I see to it that they pay me very handsomely for my work," Amber said, her voice completely flat and without any feeling. "I'm not trying to justify it, I'm simply telling you what it is." "So why are you coming to me at this point?" Rachel asked with a sharp tone. "Because Marcus is not like the others." "What are you trying to say?" Amber finally looked up, and her eyes connected with Rachel's. "The other men I was involved with were insecure and arrogant. They were easy to manage. They cheated on their wives to feel significant. They left their families for a younger woman. They were pitiful, but they were never actually dangerous." "And what about Marcus?" "Marcus is an entirely different type of evil." Amber's voice started to quiver. "I truly believed that I was the one managing the situation, but he was manipulating me from the very start." Rachel felt something inside of her change. It was not a feeling of pity, but a sense of shared experience. She understood completely what it was like to think you held all the power, only to find out you were a single piece in a much more sinister plan. "What did he do?" "He put his hands on my neck last week," Amber said in a whisper. "He told me that if I ever considered leaving, he would destroy me in the same way he destroyed you. And I believed him because I know what he can do." "But why would he make threats? I assumed you two were getting married." Amber laughed, a brief and bitter sound. "A marriage was never going to happen. Marcus has no interest at all in having a wife. He wants things he can own," Amber explained. "I was just a useful tool to get you out of his way. Now that you are out of the picture, I am the next problem he needs to solve." Rachel absorbed the stunning revelation. "So you did not come here out of guilt. You came here because you need my help to save your own skin." "I came here so we can save each other," Amber said, correcting her. She pulled a small flash drive from her pocket. I have a recording of every conversation Marcus and I have had for the last 6 months. It was my insurance policy in case things went wrong. And Rachel, things have gone very wrong. What is on it? It has everything. It has Marcus admitting he faked your medical history. It has Marcus and his mother planning how to frame you for financial fraud. It has Marcus detailing his plan to make sure you never laid eyes on Emma again. Amber carefully set the drive on the table that separated them. This is enough to completely destroy him, but we have to be very careful with how we use it. As Rachel listened to the audio, her heart beat so fast she felt it would break through her ribs. She heard the cold, detached voice of Marcus talking about her like she was an obstacle in a business deal, not the woman he had vowed to love. Using postpartum psychosis is a brilliant move, Marcus said in one recording, who never had to question their own authority. A new voice spoke on the recording saying, "Nobody ever questions the mental state of a new mother after a difficult birth. We just need a couple of doctors to sign off on it. After that, Rachel will just be seen as the unstable ex-wife who no one would ever trust with a child." Victoria's voice then came through on the recording, asking, "So what is my role in all of this? What do I do after the divorce is finalized? You will become Emma's stepmother naturally. We will need to wait for a reasonable amount of time to make it look respectable. But Victoria, you already know the deal. If you play your part well, you will be paid very generously." "And what if Rachel fights back?" Marcus just laughed. "How can she? I have already paid off her lawyer. I am taking care of her private investigator. The moment she is committed for a psychiatric evaluation, nobody will ever believe a single word she says." The recordings continued for hours. Rachel and Amber listened to every last word, putting together the pieces of a destructive plot that went far beyond a simple affair. Marcus had been planning to get rid of Rachel even before their daughter Emma was conceived. The pregnancy just gave him the perfect excuse to put his sick plan into action. Later that night, Tyler and Diane came to the small apartment to join them. Tyler walked back and forth across the small living room, his anger obvious. "Let me make sure I understand this," he said. "The same woman who helped ruin my sister's life is now the only person who can save her?" Rachel met his look with a calm expression. "She is our only shot, Tyler," she corrected him softly. "And she is the person who provided the evidence we need to come out on top." Diane, always the realist, folded her arms. "And how exactly did she get this evidence? She secretly recorded them. A court of law might not even allow it." Amber's voice was soft but strong when she spoke. "It does not have to go to court. It just has to be seen by everyone," she continued. "Marcus has created his entire life around his public persona. People see him as a brilliant young inventor, a wonderful husband and dad, a respected member of society. If this information is released, his backers will disappear. The board of directors will desert him. His whole world will fall apart." Tyler then asked, "So the plan is to give this to the news?" Rachel shook her head. "No, I want to offer Marcus a choice," she explained. "The exact same choice he offered me a long time ago. He can walk away from everything or he can stay and see his perfect life go up in flames." Diane let out a long breath. "Rachel, this is a huge risk. You are talking about trying to force a billionaire's hand. I am talking about fighting fire with fire," Rachel answered, her voice calm and determined. "Marcus used his wealth and influence to destroy me. He took my child away and convinced everyone that I was crazy. Now," she said, her voice steady, "I finally have what his money can never buy. I have the truth." Tyler looked at his sister's determined expression for a long moment, then gave a slow, firm nod. "Tell us what you need." "I need you to help me set up a meeting with Marcus, and it has to be only the two of us." "That is a horrible idea," Diane said right away. "He could call the police on you. He could try to have you committed again." Rachel agreed with a nod. "He could, but he will not. I'm about to give him a deal that he cannot possibly turn down." They arranged the meeting for Friday evening at a quiet restaurant in Greenwich. The location was public, which made it safe, but also offered enough privacy for a serious talk. Rachel got there early. She chose a table in the corner, ordered a simple glass of water, and waited. Marcus arrived at exactly 7 o'clock. He wore a dark gray suit that probably cost more than a small car. His smile was full of confidence, as if this whole thing was just an amusing little distraction for him. "Rachel," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "I have to say, I was surprised when you called. My lawyers gave me very strong advice not to come." "I am sure they did. They probably warned you that I am unstable, that this is just some kind of trap." Rachel gave him a small, knowing smile. "Well, on that, they are about 50% right." For just a second, the confidence in Marcus's eyes wavered. What is that supposed to mean? "It means that over the last month, I have been carefully studying you and your business methods. And Marcus, I am a very fast learner." She calmly pulled out her phone and played a 30-second clip. The sound of Marcus's own voice filled the quiet space between them. "The story about postpartum depression is perfect. Nobody ever doubts the sanity of a new mother after a tough delivery." All the color drained from Marcus's face. "Where did you get that?" he demanded, his voice low. "Does it make a difference?" Rachel asked. Her tone was so calm. She could have been talking about the weather. "What is important is that I have 12 hours of recordings exactly like that one. It is all in there. You and Victoria, planning out every single detail of how you would destroy my life. You confessing to financial crimes, you even talking about how to bribe city officials. That is not legal. A recording like that would never be allowed as evidence in court." "Maybe not in a courtroom," Rachel said, leaning forward just a little. "But I have a feeling your business partners would be fascinated to hear it. Your board of directors would be too, along with all those journalists who write such glowing stories about the brilliant chief executive officer with the perfect family." "You are bluffing." "Am I?" Rachel then slid a printed email across the table to him. "This is from Sarah Chen at the Wall Street Journal. She is in the middle of a huge story about scandals in the tech world, and I've already promised her an exclusive interview." Marcus simply stared at the paper. His perfect, self-assured expression was finally starting to crumble. "What is it you want?" he asked, his words tight with anger. Rachel explained her conditions. "First, you will give me full and unquestioned custody of our daughter Emma. Second, the prenuptial agreement is canceled. Third, you will pay me $50 million, and I know that is less than the amount you have stashed away in secret accounts. And Marcus, listen closely. This is the most important condition. You will never try to contact me or our daughter again. No phone calls, no visits, absolutely nothing. That is completely insane. That is the price you have to pay for your secrets," Rachel replied as she stood up to go. "You have until noon on Monday to make your choice. If I do not have signed legal papers by then, all of these recordings become public." She turned and walked out of the restaurant and did not look back even once. The moment she got outside, her hands started to shake so much that she could hardly hold her car keys, but she kept herself together until she was safely inside her car in the lot. As soon as she closed the door, she called Diane. "It is over," she said, her voice trembling. "All we can do now is wait." Monday morning came with a sky full of heavy, dark clouds and a cold rain that was a perfect match for Rachel's mood. She had not been able to sleep since her dinner with Marcus. Every time she shut her eyes, she saw his face, the way his arrogance had shattered, and the cold, calculating expression that took its place. She knew she had backed him into a corner, and a cornered animal is always the most dangerous. At 11:45 that morning, her phone vibrated with a message from a number she did not recognize. "The documents are signed. They are on their way to your lawyer's office." Rachel stared at her phone's screen. She had given Marcus the name of an attorney Evelyn suggested, a man named David Stone, who was known for being honest. Could it really be finished so easily? She dialed David's office without a moment's delay. "Mr. Stone, my name is Rachel Bennett. Did you happen to receive any documents from my husband?" "Yes, I did," David answered, his voice careful. "Mrs. Bennett, these documents give you everything you demanded. Complete custody of your daughter, the cancellation of the prenuptial agreement, and a financial settlement of $50 million. Rachel felt hot tears of relief roll down her cheeks. So it actually worked. He really did it. It definitely looks that way. But Mrs. Bennett, I need you to listen to me very closely. I have practiced law for 30 years. Men like Marcus Bennett do not simply give up. What are you trying to tell me? I am telling you to be careful. Read every single word in these documents and pay attention to everything and everyone around you. That night, Rachel went to Diane's apartment for a little celebration. Diane opened a bottle of champagne, Tyler showed up with a pizza, and even Amber was there. Amber seemed on edge, but her eyes also held a small spark of hope. "Here is to you getting your life back," Diane said, lifting her glass for a toast. Tyler smiled and then said, "And to Emma. She is finally getting her mother back." Rachel did her best to smile, but a deep sense of unease was growing inside her. It had all happened too quickly, too perfectly. Marcus Bennett was not the kind of man who accepted defeat. He would never part with $50 million without a fight. What detail had she overlooked? The answer arrived at 9:17 that evening, with a loud, forceful knocking on Diane's front door. A man's voice shouted, "New York Police Department, open the door!" The color vanished from Diane's face. "What is going on?" she whispered. Tyler immediately moved to stand in front of the door, as if he could shield them. "Do you have a warrant?" he called out. "Yes, we do. Open this door right now, or we will force it open." They unlocked the door, and 3 police officers came inside, followed by a detective who had a tired, weary look on his face. The detective showed them his badge and said, "Rachel Morrison Bennett, you are under arrest for the crimes of wire fraud and extortion." Rachel felt like the floor was falling out from under her. "What?" was all she could say. "We have evidence showing you tried to blackmail Marcus Bennett using recordings you obtained illegally. We also have information that you conspired with Amber Jenkins to steal money from Bennett Technologies." "That is a lie," Rachel said, her voice full of disbelief. "I never took anything." "I am certain you will get a chance to discuss that," the detective said without emotion. But at that very moment, another loud noise erupted from the apartment door. "Police, open the door!" Everyone in the room exchanged confused glances. 2 more officers came inside, followed by a different detective wearing a long coat. "We have a warrant for the arrest of Marcus Bennett," the new detective declared. Just then, Diane hurried back into the room with a man in a well-tailored suit right behind her. "Rachel, we got your signal. Are you okay?" Diane shouted. The lawyer then stepped forward. "My name is Tyler Vance. 2 days ago, my client, Amber Jenkins, reached out to our firm. We now have the original, unedited recordings, her complete signed testimony, and the bank statements that detail every illegal money transfer." Rachel turned to look at Amber, completely at a loss for words. Amber gave her a slight, weary smile. "Marcus was watching everything I did. I had to let him think I was on his team. I was sure he would try to frame you one last time." At that instant, a news notification appeared on Diane's phone. She held it out so Rachel could see. The headline announced, "Billionaire Marcus Bennett arrested for fraud, kidnapping, and conspiracy." Underneath was a photograph of Marcus being escorted away in handcuffs, his carefully crafted public image ruined forever. Tears of incredible relief began to stream down Rachel's face. After so much pain, she could finally see hope. She was going to have her daughter back. The terrible dream was finally at an end. Has there ever been a time when your whole world just collapsed in a single moment? For Rachel, that time was right now. The holding cell at the Manhattan Detention Center was a cold, gray space that smelled like despair. She sat on a rigid metal bench with her head in her hands. She was trying to figure out how things had gone so terribly wrong so quickly. Only a few hours earlier, she thought she was getting her life back. She held the signed documents in her hand, papers that granted her custody of her daughter and ensured her own freedom. But now she was up against severe federal charges. She could be imprisoned for many, many years. If you think that the bravery of one person can make all the difference, then you need to hear the rest of this story. At about 2 a.m, a guard came to her cell. "Bennett, you've got a visitor." The guard walked Rachel to the visiting area. She was expecting to find her lawyer, David Stone, or maybe her friend Diane. The woman waiting for her, however, was a complete stranger. She appeared to be in her 60s and had beautiful silver hair. Even under the harsh fluorescent lights at this hour, she was dressed with a simple elegance. Mrs. Bennet, the woman began. My name is Margaret Bennet. I am Marcus's mother. Rachel was completely still. Marcus had always insisted that his mother was no longer alive. He says that to everyone, Margaret said in a calm voice. It is far easier than admitting that I want nothing to do with him. Margaret pointed to the chair across from her. Please have a seat. We do not have very much time. What are you doing here? Rachel questioned. I am here, Margaret replied, because my son has turned into a monster, and I refuse to stand by while he ruins the life of another innocent person. Rachel slowly lowered herself into the chair, her thoughts racing. Another person? Marcus's first wife, Margaret clarified. Her name was Elizabeth. She passed away in a car crash 8 years ago. At least, that is what the official record states. And what does the unofficial version say? Rachel asked softly. Elizabeth was attempting to get away from him. She had documentation of everything, his secret relationships, his financial misdeeds, his cruelty. She was going to take their son and just vanish. A very deep and old sadness entered Margaret's voice. She died only 2 weeks before their divorce was scheduled to be finalized. The report described it as a single-vehicle accident on a slick road. There were no other people who saw it happen. Do you believe Marcus set it up? I believe my son is capable of anything to safeguard his empire. Margaret leaned in closer, her gaze fixed on Rachel. And I believe the threat you are facing is much more serious than you understand. I'm already in jail, Rachel stated. I am dealing with federal charges. Those charges are about to go away, Margaret assured her. That is not what Marcus really wants. This arrest is merely a diversion. It is his method for keeping you contained while he executes his true plan. And what is his true plan? Amber Jenkins was never helping him, Margaret disclosed. She has been working for me the whole time. Margaret then pushed a large folder across the table toward Rachel. It was filled with papers. For years, I've been gathering evidence against my own son, just waiting for the perfect opportunity to finally put a stop to him. Rachel, your waiting period is finished. Just 72 hours following her arrest, all federal charges against Rachel were unexpectedly dismissed. The official explanation was that there was not enough convincing evidence. The actual reason was something much more formidable. For 20 long years, Margaret Bennet had been meticulously collecting proof against her own son. She possessed bank records, sworn declarations from witnesses, and clear evidence of bribery, fraud, and even more serious offenses. This was the type of proof that Marcus could not pay to make disappear or intimidate into silence because Margaret had concealed it in locations he would never be able to access. And now, she was finally prepared to reveal it. I just cannot believe it, Rachel said. She was in David Stone's office with Margaret, Tyler, and Diane. Why go through all of this now? What pushed you to get involved and assist me? Because you were the first one who was powerful enough to oppose him and make it through, Margaret responded. Elizabeth crumbled when the strain became too much. The other women he harmed simply accepted his money and signed papers to stay quiet. But you, she continued, her gaze unwavering, you would not back down, regardless of what he put you through. She could have just ignored it and allowed Marcus to destroy my life. Yes, that is true. But there is something you must know about my son, Margaret said, her voice becoming incredibly firm. He demands absolute victory. He cannot accept the idea of an opponent left standing. Even if you had taken his money and left, he would have eventually pursued you. Marcus might have simply let you walk away, but you stood up to him. You made him appear powerless. For that reason, he is committed to your absolute and final ruin. Therefore, we have a different plan. We are going to ruin him first. The plan that Margaret laid out was masterful in its simplicity. All of Marcus's influence was built upon his public persona. He had painstakingly created a name for himself as a forward-thinking and ethical businessman who built a massive empire through dedication and skill. The only issue was that this entire image was a complete fabrication. Bennett Technologies was actually founded on stolen concepts and business arrangements financed with illegal funds. He eliminated his rivals through illegal tactics. At the core of this whole fraudulent operation was Marcus, a man who had not followed the rules for a single day of his life. I have every single part of the puzzle, Margaret detailed. I have patents he took from small-time inventors. I have agreements he intimidated people into signing. I have financial documents that show decades of deception. Why did you hold back for so long before exposing all of this? I was scared, Margaret confessed, her voice shaking just a little. Marcus wields a kind of influence that I could never challenge by myself. If I had made an attempt to stop him and did not succeed, he would have crushed me. After that, there would be no one remaining to ever bring the truth to light. What made you change your mind? You did, Margaret replied, looking straight into Rachel's eyes. You proved to me that it is really possible to resist. You showed that the legal system can be effective, but only if someone is courageous enough to take a stand and insist on justice. The press conference took place on a Tuesday morning, right on the steps of the federal courthouse in Manhattan. Margaret stood at a podium with her legal team beside her, addressing a large group of journalists. Behind her, enormous screens began displaying the incriminating proof she had collected over 2 decades. Rachel observed the whole scene from a little coffee shop across the street, finally holding her daughter Emma in her arms once more. The court had officially overturned the custody arrangement just 3 days before. The judge stated that there was undeniable proof of interference in the initial hearing. When her daughter was at last returned to her, Rachel had wept for an entire hour straight. Now she looked on as Margaret took apart her own son's empire, one corrupt section at a time. My son, Marcus Bennett, has dedicated 20 years to constructing a false reputation as a man of honor, Margaret declared. Her voice was filled with authority and conviction. Today, that fabrication is over. The documents flashed onto the huge screens. They revealed stolen patents, fake contracts, and logs of cash bribes to government officials. The proof of his wrongdoing was so extensive that not even the most skilled lawyer in the world could talk his way out of it. Then, right in the middle of the live news conference, Margaret delivered her final, shocking announcement. I am also here to let everyone know, she said to the reporters, that I am giving federal investigators some new information about the death of my former daughter-in-law, Elizabeth Bennett. This evidence shows that her death might not have been the terrible accident we were all led to believe. The scene exploded into pure chaos. The constant flashing of cameras made the courthouse steps look like they were in the middle of a lightning storm. And somewhere in his mansion in Greenwich, Marcus Bennett had to be watching his entire life turn into ashes. Marcus was arrested later that same afternoon at the airport. He was just about to get on a private jet, headed for a country that does not send criminals back. The video of him being led away in handcuffs was on every news channel for the next few days. The tech genius, the loyal family man, the generous charity donor, was now just another criminal trying to run from the law. Rachel watched the news from Diane's apartment, with Emma sleeping peacefully on her lap. So, what does it feel like? Her brother Tyler asked. Rachel considered his question. She thought she would feel happy or victorious, or maybe even excited to see the man who tried to destroy her finally get what he deserved. But instead, she just felt worn out, exhausted, and strangely hollow. I just feel like I want it to be done, she said quietly. I want to have just one day where I do not have to think about Marcus Bennett at all. That is exactly what you should do, Diane told her firmly. You should go. As the New York City skyline shrank in her rearview mirror, Rachel felt like she was watching a bad dream finally come to an end. In a very short time, the city that had brought her so much suffering disappeared from view completely. The road ahead of her was new and unfamiliar, taking her toward a future she could not quite see yet. But for the first time in what felt like a whole lifetime, she was filled with a real sense of hope. 1 year later, Rachel Morrison was standing on the front porch of her farmhouse in Vermont, watching the sun sink below the mountains. Her daughter, Emma, who was now 2 years old, was happily running around the yard chasing fireflies. Her little legs were strong and steady as she moved through the grass, reaching for the bugs that lit up the evening air like tiny, shimmering sparks. The sound of her laughter, clear and joyful, drifted across the lawn with no sign of the darkness that had surrounded her birth. Rachel had kept her promise to Diane. To everyone in her calm Vermont town, Rachel was simply a kind, single mother raising a delightful daughter named Emma. Nobody knew about the billionaire, his web of lies, or the nightmare she had managed to escape. Her neighbors had no clue about her past. Rachel worked a part-time job teaching English at the local high school. Her students saw her as Mrs. Morrison, the teacher who was always there to listen. They sensed she understood what it felt like to be left behind by the world, because she believed everyone deserved a second chance. Her home was in Vermont now. She spoke with her sister weekly and sent new photos of Emma every day. She even drove back to New York 2 times a year to make sure Emma knew her aunt and uncle. Her brother Tyler would visit from the city every few months. He and his wife Diane always made the long journey in his pickup truck. During one trip, Diane watched Emma playing in the yard. She said, you could have stayed in the city. You could have a life of total luxury with people to cook and clean, never working again. Rachel just smiled and gently shook her head. That life was never the real me. I think I just lost my way for a little while. She had given most of the settlement money to charities. She kept just enough to live comfortably and ensure Emma would always be safe. It was not the kind of wealth that could change who she was inside. She was the woman who clipped coupons, drove a sensible car, and felt that honest work was worth more than fancy possessions. That version of Rachel had finally returned, and she felt more powerful than ever before. That evening, after Tyler and Diane had gone to bed, Rachel sat on her porch. She enjoyed a glass of wine with a baby monitor sitting on the table beside her. The night was peaceful and still. The sky was a beautiful blanket of stars, the kind you could never appreciate in the city. Far away, an owl made a soft call. Suddenly, her phone buzzed on the table. An email appeared from a name she never expected to see again, Margaret Bennett. The subject line was short, only 2 words. Some news. Rachel tapped the screen and opened the message. I wanted to inform you that Marcus's trial ended yesterday. The jury declared him guilty on all charges. The judge gave him a sentence of 25 years in prison without any possibility of parole. I testified against my own son. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, but it was the right thing to do. Elizabeth needed justice. You needed justice. And the world had to learn the truth about the man Marcus became. I hope you and Emma are doing well. I hope you have found the peace that was so horribly taken from you. You have a strength that you may not even see in yourself, Rachel. Never forget that. With my deepest regards, Margaret. Rachel read the entire email a second time. Then, she deleted it. The chapter of her life involving Marcus Bennett was now completely finished. He had no part in her new story. About a half year later, on a cool autumn morning, Rachel was at her kitchen table grading student papers. A knock on the front door broke the silence in the house. She was not expecting any visitors. She looked through the window and saw a delivery van in her driveway. A man in a uniform was on her porch, holding a little box. Rachel opened the door and asked, "How can I help you?" The man said, "I have a package for Rachel Morrison. I just need you to sign right here, please." She signed her name on the screen he was holding, and he handed her the box. It was so light it felt like it could be empty. There was no return address. She brought it inside, opened it, and found a single photograph. The picture was of a beautiful beach with palm trees and water so clear it looked like blue glass. Standing in the water was Marcus Bennett, holding a baby boy. She turned the photo over. 4 words were written in a handwriting she recognized immediately. "See you soon." Rachel stood completely still in her kitchen, staring at the picture. Her heart was beating fast against her ribs. Marcus was supposed to be in jail. He was serving a 25-year sentence with no chance of getting out early. But the man in the photograph was definitely him. It was the same face, the same arrogant way he stood, and the same cold, empty eyes. Her hands were shaking so badly, she could barely hold her phone, as she called her lawyer, David Stone. "Mr. Stone, this is Rachel Morrison. I need you to tell me that Marcus Bennett is still in prison." A long, heavy pause came from the other end of the line. "Mrs. Morrison, I have some very bad news. There was an incident during a prisoner transport about 3 weeks ago. Marcus was able to escape." "Escaped?" she whispered. The word was almost silent. How could that happen? He had help from someone on the inside. We believe he was planning this for several months. "Where is he now?" she asked, her voice filled with urgency. We are not sure. He has left the country. He is somewhere that does not have an extradition treaty with the United States. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is working on it, but to be honest, with his resources, he could be anywhere in the world. Rachel felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. It was the same sick feeling of her world falling apart all over again. But this time, something was different. This time, she was not alone. She was not helpless anymore, and she was absolutely finished with being afraid. She looked out the window at Emma, who was laughing and playing in the yard. Her eyes went back to the photograph. She knew exactly what he meant. She understood the scary message he was sending. See you soon. Marcus thought she would be terrified. He thought she would grab her daughter and hide. He wanted her to spend the rest of her life in fear, always looking over her shoulder. Rachel picked up her phone again. Tyler, she said as soon as her brother answered, I need you to come to Vermont. We have a problem. What kind of problem? He asked. His voice immediately filled with concern. Her own voice was surprisingly calm and steady. The kind of problem that will not just go away. Marcus is out. He sent me something. She heard him swear quietly on the other end of the phone. That son of a... I will leave tonight. Bring Diane with you, she told him. And Tyler, you should probably pack enough for a very long stay. She ended the call and walked back to the window. Emma was still chasing butterflies with no idea about the danger that had just entered their quiet life. Rachel watched her daughter for a long time. The woman she once was would have been in a panic. The old Rachel would have grabbed Emma and run away in the middle of the night. She had built this new life from the ruins of her old one, thinking she could find a safe place away from the man who would always be after her. But that part of her was gone. The woman standing in the kitchen now had survived his lies, his betrayal, and being jailed for something she did not do. She had been forced to watch him destroy her entire world. This new woman knew that running would only put off the final confrontation. Marcus Bennett wanted to start a war, and this time, Rachel was ready to fight back. She went to her closet and pulled down a box she had not touched in more than a year. Inside was the powerful tool Margaret had given her. The box was full of files, bank records, and proof of countless other crimes Marcus had committed. It spelled out all the other lives he had ruined and the terrible secrets he had spent a fortune to keep buried. This evidence would completely destroy his business empire, even if he avoided jail time. It was the key to making every person he hurt an ally of hers. Rachel placed the box on her kitchen table and started sorting the documents. Her dream of a perfect life had vanished long ago. That dream ended the day she fell to a cold floor, finally seeing that the man who promised love was actually a monster. But her real story, the one about survival and justice, was just beginning. From now on, Rachel was going to write her own story. The sun began to set behind the mountains of Vermont, filling the sky with beautiful orange and red colors. Inside their warm farmhouse, little Emma played happily. Rachel was busy on her phone, talking to lawyers, calling reporters, and finding the other women Marcus had ruined. She was building an army. She was creating a plan. She was making a safe place so strong that her daughter would be protected there for the rest of her life. This is what a mother does. A mother will stand and fight, endure the worst things possible, and will never, ever quit. Rachel stopped for a second to watch her little girl. She wanted to hold this perfect picture in her mind forever. She saw the evening sun shine in her daughter's dark hair. She heard her daughter's laugh, which sounded like the sweetest song in the world. She watched her daughter's tiny hands try to catch the fireflies lighting up the dusk. I will always protect you, Rachel promised softly in the silent room. Whatever it takes. After that, she returned to her work. The struggle for their new life was just starting, and Rachel Morrison was completely prepared for the fight. Rachel's journey teaches us a very important lesson, one that certain people do not want you to know. The truth has no price tag. You can never truly bury it. And you certainly cannot erase it with high-priced attorneys, hidden payoffs, or by telling everyone that a person is unstable. This win was bigger than just her own. This story is for all the women who were ever manipulated into thinking they were wrong. It is for all the mothers who have faced incredible odds to protect their children. It is for anyone who has been crushed by a person with more wealth and influence. It shows that the system can protect you, but you have to refuse to ever give in. Rachel did not just reclaim her own life. She made a guide for other people to find their own way out of a dark place. And here is where you can make a difference. If you were touched by her story, please just take a moment and press the like button. That simple action sends a message that stories of bravery and honesty matter to the world. It declares that when women challenge influential men, their voices must be respected. Please write a comment for me down below. I would love to hear which part of this story resonated with you. Was it the awful scene where Rachel was stuck behind the glass wall? Was it the sting of being betrayed by someone she thought she could rely on? Or was it the incredible point where she discovered her own power and finally declared, "I am done"? When you comment, you help build a supportive group. You make a secure place where survivors can connect and where people in their own struggles can feel less isolated. Please send this video to just one friend who you feel should hear this. It does not have to be because they are in the same situation as Rachel. Send it, because this kind of knowledge is the best defense we have. The better we all see how someone can manipulate and control, the more difficult it becomes for these kinds of people to succeed. And if you are new here, please become part of our community. Just press the subscribe button and then make sure to activate your notifications. In our next video, we have another amazing story that will change how you think about loyalty, deception, and the steep cost of speaking out. Never forget this. You have far more strength than those who try to tear you down. You are far more intelligent than those who try to belittle you, and there is a reserve of bravery inside you that is bigger than you know. Until our next story, continue to stand up for what is true for you. And finally, we want you to know that our team pours a huge amount of effort into the entire process for each story we share. Every turn in the story, each individual character, and all the emotional parts were designed with great care to give you something entertaining, informative, and inspiring. We are truly thankful that you decided to share your precious time with us.